one of the things that I think keeps us from some deep thought and appreciation is our fear of the misuse of adoring nature and meditating on the Lord. Meditation has kind of been sullied by the Eastern religions, where you're trying to empty yourself, and when you empty yourself, you open yourself up to influences, I believe. Whereas Christian meditation, meditating on God's goodness and on His care for us, and on His boundaries, on His laws, as the Old Testament talks about it. Those are things that I fear we don't do enough of, the quietness. And I think we also have a fear of worshiping nature, because there are those, of course, that talk about the universe in some type of deity terms, and the idea that God is in nature, and yes, He is, but that's not something to be worshipped. And so maybe to avoid that, we have erred in not meditating enough and not contemplating how God has revealed Himself in nature. So as we look at Psalm 19, I think this is another Davidic psalm, and I think it is probably one of the greatest psalm in helping us understand how God speaks through nature. It is in terms of form, not to get too academic, but it's got a mixed form. It goes from some parallelism to a back and forth kind of thing, and it's a couple of different formats within the chapter within Psalm 19. And there are many familiar passages within this psalm. And so we just want to emphasize today the fullness, if I may, of this psalm and the fullness of God's revelation in nature. So when we see in verse 1 of chapter 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse proclaims the work of His hands, that this declaration is not merely I see God in nature, but a full revealing of the creative beauty of nature. And as I've heard it said as a good argument, nature is pretty, but that doesn't mean that there was an intentional designer, an intelligent design, God. But I would add, not only is the beauty of nature a indicator or a proof of a creative God, but even a greater proof is the fact that we can appreciate it and enjoy it. So that ability, not just to enjoy the fruits of nature, we can grow food, and we can use materials to build shelter and all of those very practical things that nature provides us. But we also have the beauty of nature that speaks to us very forcefully. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse proclaims the work of His hands. We had sky in the Midwest, but we were not quite as close to our atmosphere, and we had a lot of moisture and clouds in the way. And so the clarity and brilliance and frequency of clear skies here in this part of the world is really remarkable. We don't spend enough time, I say we, Cheryl and I don't spend enough time. We're always glad when we do, but we don't spend enough time sitting on the deck with all the lights off and just watching the stars. And you'll see a meteor fly by, and you'll see stars that science tells us may have died long ago, but the light is just now getting to us. And then we'll see, the occasional satellite go by, or a space station go by, or that really scary Starlink series of satellites that go through. You ever seen that? Yeah. And my son, when he was probably 8 or 9 or 10, maybe, he came to the same realization that we all have to. He said, "You mean everything that we have is basically made out of dirt?" And that's true. You look at your automobile, and you've got rubber and metal and different types of materials in there. And all of that was taken from the earth, whether it be the rocks or the soil or the principle of magnetism or the something that grows out of the soil. Really, really remarkable. So the expanse of what the earth offers us proclaims the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour out speech. Night after night, they communicate knowledge. They are telling a story. Nature is telling a story every time that we look and hear. We talked a little bit about babies and about children today. And one of the things that we can appreciate about toddlers is they are fascinated by nature. Do any of you still have the sticks and little rocks that your toddler brought to you? They were just fascinated by it. And it's stuff that you would kick it out of the way, you know, or sweep off or put in the fire. But they're just fast. I found this stick for you. It's a great gift. Or, you know, you're sometimes they're cat-like in the way that they'll bring you something dead. But they can sit and watch an anthill for a long time. They'll watch a bug navigating a gravel driveway. They'll see worms moving around. They'll see movement in the trees, and they'll say, "Look at that bird, look at that bird." And we think about some of the magnificent wildlife that we see. We've got a little roadrunner that runs around our yard. I've been trying to make friends with him and put out birdseed. I've watched too many cartoons, and I just assume they're going to get over there and join us. But I'm fascinated. And there are things about that. I haven't done a whole lot of research on roadrunners particularly, but there are things about that bird. The comb, you know, goes up and down, and the tail goes up and down, and they can see things that they eat. They're omnivores. I think they like to eat bugs as well as maybe some seeds and stuff. And their ability to see them is amazing. And of course, they have the eyes on the side, not like us. And so, you know, the only way you can get a look at them is through their, you know, they're always giving you the side eye because they're just looking. And I think there's a rule about whether you're a predator or prey, about where your eyes are. But not just the folly of the pure evolutionist, non-theistic origin of things. It's not just silly, and I'm not against science. All right, I want to make this clear. And we do have evidence of animals changing over time. Humans have changed over time. I had a deacon in our home church when I was young. He was probably 5'2", 5'3", and he was intellect. He was a college professor, dean, I think, as a matter of fact. And he traveled overseas, and he said one of the things that was encouraged to him is when he would see an original suit of armor that they were about his size. So we have, and if you've ever ridden in a mechanical conveyance from 80 years ago or 100 years ago, it's hard to believe we've had, you know, functional vehicles that long. You'll notice that they're not made for 6-foot Americans. When I got these chairs, I was looking to replace chairs, and I was looking on the marketplace, and I saw these, and I thought, Americans are not getting any smaller, so this size chair is going to be adequate for us, right? So we have changed as a human race. But a fish has never become a boy. And cross-species development and even many calculations of the billions of years that it took to evolve things, that it just logically doesn't make sense. And you don't have to be a believer in intelligent design to say that the particular theory of absolute evolution, that something popped billions of years ago and everything developed out of that. And you see these ridiculous charts where you see a fish and then the fish is on the land and then eventually it becomes something with legs and feet. And the wickedness of that, is that it is promoted largely to refute the existence of a loving, creative God who made us by design. The devil would be happy for us to believe that we came from a great grandfish, or that we came up through some evolutionary slew that created monkeys, and then, and I don't mean to make light of those who try to resolve the findings and fit them into an evolutionary context. But I'm just saying logic and science truly does not support the absolute theory of nothing becoming something. Yeah. Doesn't make sense. Or for something that is unique to become something else that is unique. It just does not happen. And I kind of like the old story of the scientists who are debating with God, and they say, God, we've discovered the secret of life. We're gonna create life here just to show you that man can do that. And so God says, okay, well, let's do it. And so the scientist takes some dirt, and God says, wait a minute, that's mine. You start with your own. Yeah. There you go. So the preaching, the evangelical message that we get, the sharing, the look at me, this is what I'm doing for you. And I was particularly impressed with the stories that sounded like you're thinking, God did that just for me. There's this heavenly thing. There's this bird that showed up. There's this cloud formation that's up there. There's this break in the weather. And it just seemed like God was doing that in the heavenlies and with his own hands just to minister to my need at this moment. And God certainly can be merciful and do that. Day after day, they pour out speech. Night after night, they communicate knowledge. Nature is an encyclopedia of knowledge about God. And again, we understand that God is revealed in nature, that the attributes of nature are not a God or worthy of worship, but rather points us to the one who is worthy of worship. And yet in verses 3 and 4, all of this speech, all of this pronouncement, all of this wisdom that is given to us through nature there's no speech, there are no words, their voice is not heard. And yet their message, their teaching, their measuring has gone out to the whole earth, and their worlds to the ends of the world, and their words to the ends of the world. So this words is a conversation. It's a discourse. It's a revelation. It's a story. It's more than just saying, oh, that's pretty. Only God could do that. In the heavens, he has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming from his home. It rejoices like an athlete running a course. If you've ever had the pleasure of coming home from a trip or a day at work or from service overseas, and somebody wants to open their arms and run to you and embrace you in a welcome home, or if you've seen a bursting from the gate in a race, or the athlete who is running a successful course, all of these things speak to the enthusiasm of God's speaking through nature. It rises from one end of the heavens and circles to their other end, and nothing is hidden from its heat. The glory of God's creation is inescapable. The heat of the sun, you may be able to get away from the light of the sun, but you will never get away from the heat of the sun, because even if you're in a cold place, even if you're in underground dark, even life that is there is sustained only by the heat of the sun that may not be visible at the moment. There's no hiding in the shadows to avoid the presence of God. The instruction of the Lord is perfect. This law, this rulemaking, these boundaries, it renews one's life. It causes a revival in our hearts. The testimony of the Lord is trustworthy, making the inexperienced wise. The precepts of the Lord are right, making the heart glad. The command of the Lord is radiance, not darkness, making the eyes light up. I think all of you are probably aware that being in nature, particularly movement in nature, has statistically has great an effect in most cases than antidepressant medication. So it may be very, very challenging for a person who is truly afflicted by depression to get out of bed, to move, to get into nature, because that's the destructive power of depression, which is sometimes it's attitudinal, sometimes it's situational, and sometimes it's just biological. So I'm not condemning anybody that's suffering with that. But one of the most effective treatments is to get out into nature. And I think one of the mental health problems that we have in modern culture is we don't get out in the nature. We don't get out. We get our vitamin D. We don't get out. We smell the breeze. We don't get out and see the trees. We don't get out and get inspired and enlightened as much as we could. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. So we sometimes are uncomfortable talking about the fear of the Lord, but as I said, when I think that the oceans are an amazing testimony to God, but I fear the power of the oceans, and I don't think just because I'm a believer that I'm immune to drowning or snake bites or shark bites or jellyfish stings. And I love thunderstorms. I just when I hear thunderstorms, now a lot of people are afraid of thunderstorms, and I get that because lightning and winds and torrential rains can cause problems. But to me, it's just the Lord speaking. I really enjoy thunderstorms, but you've got to fear them. They're often a prelude to some things that can be very damaging. The ordinances of the Lord are reliable and altogether righteous. They are more desirable than gold, than an abundance of pure gold, and sweeter than honey. Honey in these ancient days was used as medicine, as well as being something that the wealthy would enjoy. Sweeter than honey dripping from a honeycomb. In addition, your servant is warned by them, and in keeping them there is an abundant reward. So as God reveals himself, he shows his boundaries, he instructs us in the law, and in those boundaries, we are warned about the consequences of misbehavior and of sin, and we are given an abundant reward for our obedience. Who perceives his unintentional sins? Cleanse me from my hidden faults. One of the things that we are perfectly capable of doing is confessing our sins, our known sins. But we are in the presence of a holy God, and we, in our sinful nature, can't fully understand all of the things that we do that are offensive to God. And so there is a provision in the Old Testament sacrificial system for unintentional sins or unknown sins. And so as we confess our faults to the Lord, we probably ought to pray this prayer: cleanse me from my hidden faults. Moreover, keep your servant from willful sins. Do not let them rule me. Then I will be blameless and cleansed from blatant rebellion. And then this last verse is a wonderful and beautiful benediction. Some of you probably have memorized this. If not, it's an easy verse to memorize, and it's a great one to memorize for your personal worship and confession. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, Lord, my rock and my redeemer. And that is the benediction for our message today as well.